When we talk about shame, we're not talking about some small, fleeting emotion. We're talking about one of the heaviest psychological burdens a human being can carry. Shame is different from guilt. Guilt is that little voice that says, I did something wrong. Shame, on the other hand, says, I am something wrong. Do you feel the difference? One is about behavior, the other about identity. And when shame creeps into a person's identity, it doesn't let go easily. Now here's the powerful truth. When someone carries shame in the context of a relationship, they don't need you to punish them. They don't need you to yell. They don't even need you to remind them of what they've done. Because every time they look in the mirror, every time they sit alone with their thoughts, the punishment is already there. And that punishment is silent, invisible to the outside world, but it's crushing on the inside. Think about this for a moment. Imagine walking into a room where someone you hurt is sitting quietly. They don't raise their voice. They don't confront you. They just sit there. And yet, their very presence pulls something out of you. Reminds you of what you did, of how you betrayed your own values. That's the power of silent shame. It's not imposed from the outside. It's generated from within. And because it's generated from within, there's no escape from it. You can leave the room. You can turn off your phone. You can distract yourself for a while. But eventually, when the noise settles, shame is still there waiting for you. Psychologists often say that shame thrives in secrecy. It grows stronger in silence. But here's the paradox. When you're the one who has been wronged, your silence can become the mirror in which the other person sees themselves most clearly. They can't escape facing who they've become, not because you're pointing it out, but because their own conscience won't let them forget. And the weight of that is far heavier than anything you could have said to them. What makes shame so powerful is that it rewires how a person sees themselves in the eyes of others. If she knows she has broken trust, if she knows she has crossed a line, every interaction with you becomes loaded with unspoken tension. She might laugh, she might pretend, but underneath her body betrays her. She avoids your eyes, she shifts uncomfortably, she hides behind excuses or distractions. Why? Because looking at you is looking at a reflection of her own choices. You represent the truth she cannot deny, and that truth is unbearable. And here's the thing. Human beings can survive a lot of external punishment. We can handle someone yelling at us. We handle arguments. We can even handle rejection. But shame operates on a deeper level. Shame is internal exile. It's like being locked out of your own sense of worth, your own sense of belonging. It says, you don't deserve connection. You don't deserve respect. You don't deserve peace. And when someone falls into that cycle, it can torment them for years. Now, why does this matter to you? Because many people think the way to handle betrayal or disappointment is to lash out, to seek revenge, to force the other person to feel what you feel. But the truth is, you don't need to. Her shame is already doing the work for you. The more you remain grounded, calm, and unmoved, the louder her internal punishment becomes. You see, silence, when rooted in strength, is not weakness. It is power. Shame strips away the masks people wear. It forces them to confront their actions not through your words, but through their own conscience. And here's the most fascinating part. When shame sets in, people often start rewriting their own story. They ask themselves, who am I becoming? How did I let myself get here? And those questions cut deeper than anything you could ever say to them, because the voice inside their own head is always louder than the voice coming from outside. So understand this, you don't have to chase validation, you don't have to beg for recognition, and you don't have to demand that she sees your value. The fact that she cannot look you in the eye anymore, that is the evidence. That is the proof that her silent punishment has already begun. And if you're tempted to break the silence, to remind her of what she did, resist that urge. Because the moment you try to force shame on someone, you actually give them a way out. You give them a chance to defend themselves, to argue, to push responsibility back onto you. But when you remain steady, when you let silence do the talking, there's no escape. She's left alone with her truth, and that truth is unrelenting. So remember, shame is not about you telling her who she is. Shame is about her realizing who she has become. And that realization is her prison. You don't need to build the walls. She's already trapped inside. The weight of shame is heavier than any confrontation. And when someone can no longer face you, when even your presence becomes unbearable, you've already won the battle you thought you had to fight. Because the greatest punishment is not what you do to her. It's what she can no longer escape inside herself. When shame takes root, it doesn't just live inside the mind, it begins to shape behavior. It creates distance, and that distance is rarely announced. It doesn't come with a warning. It begins subtly, Almost imperceptibly at first, a shift in tone, a hesitation before speaking, the avoidance of eye contact. It's small, but it's consistent, and it begins to form an invisible wall between you and her. Why does that wall form? Because shame does not want to be exposed. Shame thrives in the shadows, but the presence of person she wrongs, the person shines a light too bright to ignore. And so the natural response is avoidance. She might not even be fully conscious of it. Yet every fiber of her being pushes her to step back, to create space, to protect herself from the mirror that your presence has become. But think about human connection for a moment. True connection is built on trust, on honesty, on the ability to look another person in the eye and feel safe. But when shame enters the equation, safety is destroyed. Looking into your eyes doesn't feel safe anymore. It feels dangerous because it forces her to face a reality she cannot handle. So instead of connection, she chooses distance. And that distance is her survival mechanism. But here's the irony: the more distance she creates, the more isolated she feels. And that isolation isn't freedom, it's a cage. She might distract herself with noise, with people, with business, but deep down, she knows that the gap between you and her is not accidental. It is self-created, and it is fueled by the very shame she is trying to escape. That's why the unspoken distance is so powerful. It is not just physical, it's emotional, psychological, and even spiritual. And let's be honest, distance in relationships is not always about geography. You can be sitting 2 feet away from someone and feel like you're on different planets. You can be in the same house, share the same dinner table, even sleep in the same bed, and yet the emotional gap is vast. Why? Because presence without connection is emptiness. And when shame enters, connection evaporates. Now, some of you have experienced this. You've been in a conversation where the other person couldn't meet your eyes. You've noticed the nervous laughter, the excuses, the sudden urgency to leave. Those are not random behaviors. Those are signals of distance being created. And behind that distance is one message: I cannot face you because facing you means facing myself. This is where your power comes in. Many people, when they feel someone pulling away, chase harder. They beg, they question, they confront. But what they don't realize is that by doing that, they actually relieve the other person of the weight of shame. They create a distraction from the internal battle. But if you can stay calm, composed, unmoved, you force her to confront that distance. You let the gap itself become her punishment. Philosophically speaking, distance is a form of separation not just from you, but from truth, because truth is always present in the relationship. It lingers in the air, unspoken, undeniable. She knows it, you know it. And that makes the silence between you louder than any argument could ever be. That silence becomes deafening, and that's why she avoids it. But the more she avoids, the more the truth hunts her down. And here's the key: you don't have to bridge that distance. That's not your responsibility. The distance was created by her actions, her choices, and her shame. If she cannot cross it, that is her burden, not yours. You don't need to rescue her from it. In fact, the more you stand firm in your self-respect, the more unbearable that distance becomes for her. It's not about cruelty. It's about integrity. You're not punishing her with silence. You're simply refusing to carry your shame for her. This is where people often get it wrong. They think reconciliation, forgiveness, or even confrontation is the path to closure. But sometimes the most powerful closure is non-engagement, letting the distance speak louder than words. Because when someone knows they can no longer come close to you without drowning in their own shame, that realization cuts deeper than any lecture ever could. She may try to fill the gap with distractions. She may surround herself with people who don't remind her of the truth. But deep down, she will always feel the loss of that connection. And every time she thinks about you, the unspoken distance will echo louder and louder. That echo is her reminder. That echo is her punishment. So understand this: when someone cannot face you anymore, it is not your weakness, it is your strength. It means your presence holds a standard so high, a truth so undeniable that she cannot bring herself to stand in it. And that is not your burden to carry. That is hers. The distance she created to protect herself from shame will eventually become the very thing that breaks her. And when that happens, you'll realize you never had to raise your voice, never had to argue, never had to chase. The distance itself was enough, because nothing is louder than the silence between two people who know the truth but can no longer share the same space. By now you can see how shame plants itself inside someone and how it creates distance. But what happens when that distance grows and there's no escape? Shame doesn't just sit quietly in the corner of the mind. It begins to turn inward. It transforms into something even more destructive: self-punishment. This is the stage where a person doesn't need anyone else to call them out, because their own conscience becomes their harshest critic. Every thought becomes a reminder, every memory becomes a trigger, every quiet moment becomes a courtroom where they are both the accused and the judge. And the verdict is always guilty. Think about it. When someone betrays their values, when they violate trust or step outside of integrity, something inside them breaks. On the surface, they may look fine, they may post pictures smiling, they may go out, they may even laugh in public. But behind closed doors, it's a different story. The overthinking begins. The replaying of events, the endless what ifs and why did I do that? That's the cycle of self-punishment. And here's the truth, it is relentless. Unlike guilt, which can be resolved through an apology or an action, shame is stickier. It attaches itself to identity. And when someone lives with shame, they don't just feel bad about what they did, they begin to feel unworthy as a person. That's where the spiral begins. Because when you believe you are unworthy, you sabotage your own happiness, your own peace, your own future. And you do it without even realizing it. This is why you don't have to fight, you don't have to argue, you don't have to chase justice. The human mind has a way of enforcing its own justice. She may go to bed at night trying to push the thoughts away, but the moment her head hits the pillow and the distractions fade, the truth shows up. And it doesn't just knock on the door, it sits on her chest, weighing her down. Now, let's go deeper. Philosophers have long said that the greatest prison is not the one built with bars, but the one built in the mind. And shame is exactly that kind of prison. It doesn't matter where she goes, who she's with, or what she does. She carries it with her. She punishes herself through comparison, through regret, through inability to enjoy the very things she thought she wanted. You see, the mind has a way of evening the score. When you betray someone who trusted you, you don't just lose them, you lose yourself. You lose your ability to look in the mirror and feel aligned. And without alignment, there is no peace. That's why people who carry shame often try to numb themselves through distractions, through work, through social media, sometimes through substances. They're trying to outrun themselves, but you can't outrun your own shadow. And this is where your power comes in. You don't have to be the one to deliver the punishment. Because every time she replays the choices she made, every time she looks at what she lost, every time she feels the gap widening between the person she pretends to be and the person she knows she is deep down, that is punishment. And it is far harsher than anything you could do to her. That's why silence is so effective. The less you say, the more her own mind fills in the gaps. The less you react, the more her conscience reacts for you. The more you hold your ground, the more she feels the ground shaking beneath her. Because nothing intensifies shame like facing someone who refuses to sink to the same level of petness or anger. Your calm becomes her chaos. And let's be real, self-punishment doesn't end quickly. It's not like a wound that heals overnight. It lingers, it gnaws, it resurfaces at unexpected moments. A song, a place, a memory, even a face that looks like yours. It all becomes a reminder. And every reminder reopens the wound. That's the curse of shame. It doesn't let people move on until they've truly faced themselves. So understand this clearly. You don't need to scream for accountability. You don't need to demand apologies. You don't need to prove your worth. The punishment is already alive inside her. She is both the jailer and the prisoner. She is both the question and the consequence. And she will wrestle with that long after you've chosen to walk forward. That's why your best move is not revenge, it's growth. Not anger, it's composure. Not obsession, it's elevation. Because every time you rise higher, every time you stand stronger, it highlights the contrast between where you are and where she left herself. And that contrast deepens the self-punishment even more. In the end, the harshest punishment isn't exile from you. It's exile from herself. Because when someone can no longer respect themselves, when they can no longer escape their own conscience, they've lost the very thing that makes life worth living, inner peace. And here's the final truth you need to take with you. Self-punishment is always worse than external punishment because you can run from others, but you can never run from yourself. We've explored how shame plants itself inside her, how it builds distance, and how it eventually turns into self-punishment. But now we reach the most important part. The part that determines your strength, your freedom, and your future. And that is detachment. Because the truth is, your power doesn't lie in chasing, improving, or in punishing. Your power lies in stepping back, standing tall, and letting go. Now, because let's be clear, detachment doesn't mean you don't care, it doesn't mean you're cold, and it doesn't mean you've shut off your humanity. Detachment means you've chosen not to be consumed. You've chosen not to carry someone else's shame, not to let their chaos become your chaos, not to let their guilt dictate your state of being. That's what real power looks like. Think about it. If someone wrongs you and you respond with anger, screaming revenge, you've handed them your control. You've allowed their actions to dictate your emotions. You've allowed their choices to define your state of mind, but when you detach, when you step back and say, I will not let this break me, you reclaim all of that power. And here's the beautiful part, your calm is louder than your rage, your silence is sharper than your words, your composure is the ultimate mirror that forces her to face herself. Detachment is not passive, it's active strength. It's not weakness, it's discipline, it's the refusal to waste energy on what no longer deserves your energy. And that's exactly why it's so effective, because while she is trapped in the cycle of shame, guilt, and self-punishment, you're not standing there banging on the prison bars with her. You're already walking out of the prison and into your future. And let's step into the psychology of this. Human beings are wired to seek reaction. When someone hurts you, part of them expects resistance. A fight expects confrontation. Why? Because conflict provides relief. It provides a way to shift responsibility, to project blame, to distract from the inner turmoil. But when you refuse to play the game, when you don't give her the reaction she expected, you remove that relief. She is left alone with her own shame, her own distance, her own punishment. That's what makes detachment so powerful. You're not running away, you're standing firm, and by standing firm, you intensify her confrontation with herself. Philosophically, detachment is freedom. It's the recognition that you cannot control another person's actions, but you can always control your response. It's understanding that her shame is not your burden. Her self-punishment is not your responsibility, and her choices do not define your worth. The moment you embrace detachment, you rise above the cycle and step into clarity. And here's the paradox: when you detach, you don't weaken the impact of shame. You magnify it, because your detachment removes every distraction, every excuse, every shield she could have used to protect herself. Now she is faced with the raw reality of what she did, and she has to carry it alone. That's why detachment isn't just about protecting your peace. It's about letting natural consequences play out without interference. So let's talk about you. The challenge is not whether she feels shame. The challenge is whether you have the discipline to stay detached. Because your mind will tempt you. It will whisper, say something. Prove your point. Get closure. But closure doesn't come from her. Closure comes from you deciding you're done bleeding energy into someone who no longer deserves it. Closure comes from refusing to chain yourself to the very person who already betrayed your trust. And once you master detachment, something powerful happens. You stop waiting for her punishment to satisfy you. You realize that your satisfaction doesn't come from watching her suffer. Your satisfaction comes from reclaiming your peace, your dignity, your growth. And that shift changes everything, because instead of being defined by what happened, you become defined by how you responded. And isn't that the ultimate power? To know that no matter what anyone does to you, no matter how deeply they hurt you, they can never control your spirit unless you hand it to them. Detachment is that refusal. It's the unshakable decision to say, I am bigger than this. I am stronger than this. I will not let this moment define my life. So as we close, I want you to carry this truth with you. Her shame will do its work. Her distance will eat at her. Her self-punishment will follow her wherever she goes. That is inevitable. But your role is not to sit and wait for her to break. Your role is to rise, to focus forward, to walk with dignity and strength, because the real victory isn't that she can't face you anymore. The real victory is that you can face yourself with no shame, no regret, and no loss of integrity. And that is the kind of power no one can take from you.